Hello and welcome to this episode of Adapt with DanetteFM. My name is Danette Menzies and I am the host of this podcast. I'm super excited. We're in season 3 and we're looking at adaptability and in particular experimentation. And today we're going to be talking with a dear friend of mine, Chris Scullin, who I've known for a very long time. But before we get to that, Jez, how are you? Jez Menzies or Jez FM, my co-host. How are you today?
I'm good. Pleasure to be here, Danette, and hello, listeners. Nice to see you. I hope if you are listening to this, you can also check out the video on YouTube. So we highly recommend you go check it out there as well. If you want to check a visual experience of this podcast, that is available. Danette, people may not know if they're joining you for the first time in this episode that you are an adaptability expert. But not only that, you've written a book on adaptability for this ever-changing world in which we find ourselves called The Adaptable Leader, to which the Adapt podcast is actually a companion podcast. We highly recommend people go check out the book. The world's constantly changing. The only constant is change. And so the best thing to be is adaptable in that constantly changing world. And that's what this whole podcast is looking at. Conversations with different experts about how they've adapted in the past and how they're adapting at the moment. As you mentioned, we're talking to an old friend of yours, Chris, which is great. But before we get to that chat, Danette, we've got to look around the world at our segment, Adapt the News.
Yes.
Alrighty, welcome to Adapt the News. This is the segment where, Danette, we look at a story from an international sort of news story and we pick it apart using your adaptability lens to sort of see how people are adapting and what lessons people can take away. This week, we are looking at a very interesting story, which I think kind of harkens back to humanity as a whole in some ways. It's a very interesting story. And the headline is on positive.news, "Time to do more of nothing. The art of deep hanging out." So here's just a sort of segment from the news story. Deep hanging out is fundamental to creative thinking. A more intuitive form of data collection, it turns out to be a strangely pragmatic way of ensuring a well-stocked mind and, as such, a productive approach to uncertainty. In an age where it is so difficult to see what the future holds, hanging out enlarges our field of vision and educates our instincts. But while wandering, walking, and reflecting on what one finds is native to almost all artists, its utility is by no means limited to them.
Yeah.
So, Danette, I think that that's an interesting story, and it sort of goes on to talk about sort of the fundamental sort of things that really hanging out and deep hanging out help with, and something that, people may have started to lose a little bit in the sort of 2020s with the extra technology we've got. So I want to get your thoughts on this news story.
Yeah, so I love this, and I love that it's got a term, deep hanging out, which is really that we're hanging out with ourselves. We might be in nature, we might be in a conversation, and what it's designed to do, because it's super brain friendly. So I've spoken for years about the fact that our brain actually does all of the heavy lifting, not when we're busy, but actually when we create space. So whether it's we're having a nap, we're sleeping, we're going for a walk, because that's when our subconscious can start to connect ideas that we've taken in consciously. And because everyone needs to adapt now, the world is full of uncertainty. Being able to sit in that space of uncertainty and not wanting to do what our brain loves to do, which is tick the box really fast and get certainty, but actually sit and just go, okay, I'll just sit with this. I don't need to know the answer. I'm going to work with where I'm at the moment. And, if I come back to my book, I have the accepts model. And part of that, what I've noticed, and I used that word very deliberately when I created the model, is when people tend to be adaptable, they tend to accept what is, versus when people, so they're open, they're curious, they just, okay, it is what it is, it's uncertain, I won't push back against it. Where I see people waste a lot of energy is they resist what is. So they go, I've got to have that certainty, I've got to tick a box, so I'm going to do things to try and fix this and get that certainty. Well, we're in a world that you're not going to get that certainty. I'm really sorry, but that is the way of the world. And so being okay with this is uncertain, and I'm going to work with that. I'm just going to accept that this is the right place. I love Oprah saying, I'm right where I'm meant to be. So if we accept this is a learning opportunity, if I can sit in that deep space, between projects rather than rush to the next one, I give myself time off to let my brain digest the lessons, etc., and then create space for new ideas to come rather than, okay, I finish on Friday, I'm going to start the new one on Monday. And it's like, that is not brain friendly. So I think part of what I love about this particular article is how brain friendly it is, and a great reminder of how we can be more adaptable by creating that deep space, or as they call it, deep hanging out.
Mm.
What about you, Jez?
Yeah, well, I think the thing about this is it's one of these things that's so powerful because it's like sometimes I feel like we need modern science to tell us that basic things are important to us in a way. Like this one to me, this is a thing that we've been doing before many of the things we've had, before money, before any of these concepts. Deep hanging
Yes.
out is part of our species. And so I love when stories come up like this that remind us, as much as we are advanced and we have all these different things like AI, there is a deep part of us that does need to sort of, as much as we can bring in that sort of tribal behavior in that sort of way, deep hanging out, a bit more
Yep.
connection and community, that's always
Yep.
going to feel good because that's something that's been with us for many, many, many thousands of
Yep.
years. So
Yep.
I always I love seeing stories like this that remind us, hey, hanging out is actually really important.
Yep.
I also think just a secondary thing with hanging out is that it's a great immune system to
Yes.
different situations, because being able to have multiple lens to look at something is always going to make your decision making better. Even if that lens is just to sort of give you another perspective,
Yes.
it's always going to help expand what you can see just from your own
Yes.
lens. So I always
Yep.
think that deep hanging out is great for that as well. So
Nice.
love
Love
that.
that, Jez.
Danette, did you have anything that you wanted people to keep their eyes open for with this chat with Chris?
Yes. So, as I said, I've known Chris for a very long time and watched him start up one company, then start up another one. He's doing great things, and he also has a day job as well. So, he's doing this on the side. I really liked his definition around experimentation, where he brings in that it equals risk. So, a lot of people, you know, they go risk, but the flip side of risk is opportunity. So, part of his philosophy is we need to invest in experimentation because that's going to help us manage our risk. And if we don't do any experimentation, we're going to be managing way worse risk because our competitors are going to be overtaking us pretty fast. I also loved his concept of fail fast.
Mm.
And we'll come back to that at the end of the conversation because there were some really good examples he had in there about how important it is not to get stuck in overinvesting if something's not working. So, yeah, I really enjoyed those examples.
I think that's great. Well, let's go now to your conversation with Chris Scullin.
And I am super excited with my guest today, Chris Scullin. Chris and I have known each other for years, and I've watched Chris work across a number of organisations and start up a couple of organisations as well. So I thought Chris would be the perfect guest today. So, Chris, before we get into the questions and that, I'd love for you to share with our listeners and our viewers a little bit of your background.
Yeah, thanks, Danette. I'm really excited to be chatting with you today. So, yeah, Chris Scullin. I'm a perennial punisher of myself. So coming back and doing startups over and over again, hopefully getting better at it each time I do it. But I've also got other careers that I'm running at the same time. So like most people that call themselves an entrepreneur, you've got your full-time job and your hobbies. One of them pays the bills and the other one is this exciting opportunity to do what you want to do when you can. I've born and bred in Canberra, been here my whole life, got a very strong sort of tech and people management background. Startups have all been in the real estate sector, interestingly enough, and done a lot of people and consulting work in the meantime. So that's me in a nutshell, 3 kids and happily divorced. And yeah, so if you've got any, single listeners, but
We'll
yeah,
view
no,
it.
so, yeah, that's it. So yeah, that's me
I
in a
love
nutshell.
it.
But yeah, really, really excited to be getting my hands back into the starting point of a new startup. So yeah, this is where we're at right now.
Nice. And do you want to share a little bit about your new startup?
Yeah, happy to. So Everybody loves real estate agents. I think that's something we've established over the last sort of many years that we've known each other. And my first startup was a residential property management real estate business where we only did rentals across the ACT. And it was quite successful. We ran it for about 10 years. I exited after that. And we got to about 1,200 properties under management. But in that time doing rentals only, we had a lot of exposure to sales agents who were coming in wanting to sell our stock or selling our stock. And the experience is not dissimilar to the experience that the general public have with a real estate agent. So usually quite terrible would be the way to frame it. And it's why, looking at things, real estate agents are the least trusted professionals in Australia. And I'm not making that up. That's a stat from some of the Australian government websites. So thinking about things, I'm like, surely this process can be more transparent. It can be better than what it is. And there can be more value because it's a huge transaction and you're paying a lot of money. So we gave birth to this little system called Lystr, which we've spent the last sort of 2 years developing. And it's a platform that automates primarily a lot of the work that the real estate agent does. And we're positioning ourselves right in the middle of what has typically been a traditional agency model. And at the other end of the spectrum, the DIY. And so we've positioned it as co-selling, where we have a real estate agency and a tech platform together, and we sell properties. And we launched in February of this year and haven't looked back. Things are just going nuts. And so, we're in our growth, adoption, and expansion phase now.
Awesome. So congratulations on the latest one.
Thank you.
And let's start with the questions, because I know you've got a bit of experience with this. So
Yes.
I'd love for you to define experimentation, particularly in relation to leadership and also just for organisations.
Yeah. It's had some time to think on this. And another word for experimentation is risk. Because that's when you're thinking at it from a corporate or a leadership perspective, your willingness to experiment aligns very, very strongly with your willingness to take risks. And I feel like in the current way that companies work, depending on where you are in your establishment cycles, you're either ready to consume a lot of risk or you're at a point where you're trying to mitigate all of your risks. And if you want to continue to experiment and to grow and to be, if you like, a bit more savvy in your own markets, then you really have to take on a much higher rate of risk. And the risk-reward payoff is a lot higher. But you can find yourself sort of constraining your thinking by what if people don't like this, or what if somebody comes at me about this, or, legislative compliance. We're running, a lot of organizations are running ahead of where the legislation is even up to. Real estate legislation, for example, was written in 1975 and has only been updated a couple of times since then. So when you're talking about using tech, consider that when the legislation was written, people were getting all their property ads out of newspapers. So it's taking that view of being able to take that risk, but having a perspective where it's an educated risk. You're putting money aside as part of your budget and your process to say, I'm prepared to put this at risk. It's a bit like going to the casino, but it can have a much better payoff in the long term. And so then you're committed to taking those risks and you can't back away from them. It's that experimentation is, one of the things we use in all of our startups, and the startups I've been involved in, is fail fast. And I think you've got to attach that to your experimentation as well. It's you hear the term of you're constantly flogging a dead horse, or you're looking for this outcome or something that you're never going to achieve. It's looking at the signals of your experimentation quickly, early on, having what are your measures? What are your measures of success going to be in that experimentation? What are your stage gates so that you're failing or you're going forward? And having really defined criteria around that. So you can say, if we're going to fail fast, if we don't make this first hurdle, be prepared to shut that experiment down and say, well, that didn't work. I'll turn that off. Doing that actually makes you more open to do a lot more experimentation. Because if you fail fast and you recognize your failures, you go, oh, well, that was a flaming pile of what's not. Let's move on to the next one and start another fire, shall we? ultimately one of them will catch, and away you go. But if you're not prepared to do that, what you end up doing is you're experimenting and you're continuing down the same path. And it's that, people talk about Einstein, I think it was, that said, doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result each time. Experimentation is the same. Change the
Yes.
baselines, change all your parameters, know what you're measuring yourself against, and get into it. But if you're prepared to take that risk, the flip side of it is, what if you don't experiment, and what if you don't take any risks?
Mhm.
Um,
Good question.
if that's the case, you're really stagnating your growth. You're giving your
Yeah.
competitors opportunity to chase your tail. And whether you're in a startup like we are, or you're in an established business, it's the pace of the business is set by how much you're willing and prepared to experiment. And that's giving everybody in the business the opportunity to experiment and bring ideas to the table as well. And it's so no idea is a bad idea, although there's some really weird ones. But set some time and allow people to take risks, and whether they're individuals going off on their own and doing their own thing and then coming back with this great insight and lessons learned, fantastic. But otherwise, you will stagnate, and then everybody will just fly
Yeah.
past you, or somebody from China is going to steal your business idea and replicate it before you can get to the next step. So, it's taking all of that into account, but experimentation has to be deliberate. That's
Yeah.
my view anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. And you actually reminded me when you were just talking there, Chris, there's a book by Annie Jukes, and it's called Quit. And in that, she makes the case for often we have biases that go, once we invest in something, we've got to keep doubling down on that and do the grit side. And her premise of her book, and she was a professional poker player, was that actually quit is also the equal side of that. So we should always consider that. So I like that fail fast, because that's really going, let's learn and make a balanced decision rather than more our biases running those decisions. So some great advice there.
We have
Awesome.
a comment, a statement on the bottom of our letterhead, and it just says, if we're not making mistakes, then we're not innovating fast enough.
Nice. Nice. I
So
love that.
it's living by that. It's encouraging people to have that view, but also being able to tell them to stop. Hey, we put in $5,000 after this. It's clearly not working. Let's
Yeah.
bail and go somewhere else. Not let's throw another 50 at it and hope that the first idea that was crap is going to be better in some way, shape, or form without any of the parameters changing. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, I love that. All right. So let's look at a situation, or an example of a situation where experimentation worked really well. So it could be your own, or it could be another organization.
Yeah. Look, Lystr, the startup that we're in at the moment, I think that's an example of where it's working beyond our expectations, which was great, but it was a huge risk, because time and time again, people have tried to disrupt the real estate industry. And that's what we're talking about, disrupting a 200-plus-year-old industry that's global, that charges enormous fees, very deep pockets, very protective and very secretive in terms of how they operate. And the risk was, hey, we're going to build this platform that's going to really replace real estate agents over time, over the next 2 to 5 years. That's a pretty big risk. People, when we start to share the ideas, people are, aren't you scared of what the real estate industry is going to do? And you're going to wake up one morning and find a horse's head at your front door, and, those types of things, because they've got a lot to protect. And
Yeah.
the other side of it was, we'd come out of a 10-year real estate business already. And this was hey, do we double down? So when we talk about failing fast, we're gluttons for punishment as well. But the team that we worked with in that first project are the same team now. So we've got that 10-year history, but all those lessons learned as well. But it was a risk in getting us all back together too, because we had settled into a pattern of knowing how each other works and thinks. And so trying to innovate and experiment when we know what the answer is going to be and we know what that guy's going to say, it was a challenge too. But yeah, taking this view of this experimentation, people had tried this before as well. And where that sat is, in the real estate market, there are these DIY do-it-yourself platforms where you can pay $700-800, and that gets you your listing on all the real estate sites, and they send you a PDF of how to sell your house, and away you go. And for us pitching Lystr, that's what everybody would hear. Well, this is just another DIY to sell your own property. and we had to come and think of strategies to get away around some of those risks of the perception of what we were trying to do when we're trying to take on a market like this. And we had to think about parallels. We had to think about
Yes.
what has somebody done that might work with this or match with this. And the closest we came was, if we were like a DIY, that would be like saying, yeah, you can get an Uber, but you've got to drive the car. And so we kind of flipped it and said, no, there's still a driver, and that's us. That's the real estate agent. So you get the outcomes that you want. You get all the transparency and everything else along the way, but you've still got somebody driving it, which is the real estate agent. And that's that clear point of difference. And so that experiment, we only launched, like I said, in February last year, but we're about 130% ahead of where we thought we'd be from a targets point of view, which is
Awesome.
brilliant. We've got some external
Yeah.
investment that's come into the business as well. And so in
Great.
my view, it's exceeding our expectations, and it's something where we as an organization had taken the view, we all agreed, if this doesn't work, we're going to fail fast. Despite putting 2 years into building the platform, when we turn it on, if nobody wants to use it, we're going to turn it off, because we couldn't continue to sink our personal investment and funds into it. And yeah, luckily enough, it's turned out the other way. We're really rattling the cages of the real estate industry. That's still a big risk, I'd say, for us in our back pocket. But as we're traveling at the moment, it's going really well. So yeah, I'd say risk and reward. I think we're on the way to disrupting the real estate market.
I love it. And so I'm curious, when you talked about, you're working with the same team from the last one and that settling in, how do you keep people curious and innovative when there's that familiarity?
Yeah. So this has been probably one of the best experiences in terms of doing a startup second time with the same
Yep.
group of people, or even close to. It was a lot harder this time round, not from a tech perspective or anything else, but from a people alignment point of view. People's lives move on, people have kids, all this sort of stuff. People's passions start to change as well, and their priorities are very different. So we had to, we had some moments, I'd say, where we were battling it out. And what we did was we really had to understand, out of the team, there are 4 of us working on this startup. So 2 co-founders who are shareholders and other 2 people that have joined as part of that process. We actually found that we had to properly define our swim lanes, because we kind of knew where people were going to object or jump in. We'd be jumping into each other's swim lanes and trying to cut off, well, I know they're going to respond this way, or I know they're going to have this idea, or they're going to think this is crap. So yeah, we sat down and worked through what our swim lanes were, who was good at what certain things and what had changed over the time. Who's our creative, innovative type that comes up with great ideas, but is really terrible at actually writing anything down, making notes, and following up on any of that stuff. Me. And then we've got the other side of the coin where, our other co-founder is the exact opposite of that. He's still great creatively, but he's the details guy. He's the system developer. He's the guy cutting the code. So yeah, having those swim lanes and really understanding that, it also helped us understand that where we were taking risks, if we were pushing people into each other's swim lanes or looking for second opinions. But yeah, bedding down that team was much harder the second time than we thought it might be.
Yes.
There was a lot more friction. We also had a lot more vested in this as well. So it's a much bigger risk at scale. And so, yeah, there was more at the table and more passion and more interest. And, this is the one where we went, okay, the first one was our test pilot, was a 10-year test pilot, but this is the real one. And this is the one we really want to work. Yeah. So I think some real pros in having the same team together again, but also some real risks that you need to properly manage.
And so again, not a question I said to you originally, but it really is tweaked in my mind that one of the things that happens in organizations is when friction turns up, a lot of people don't like that because it triggers threat responses in your brain.
Yep.
And yet you need to have friction to have good experimenting, etc. So
Yep.
tell us a little bit about how you navigated that in order to get through that and still be able to deliver an experiment.
Yeah. To be totally transparent, ChatGPT became my very best friend in some of these processes, because these were unexpected and unanticipated responses and frictions that, for me, I'm like, who the hell is this guy? Is this somebody that's changed? I don't understand. So I was pumping it into ChatGPT, asking am I right in saying this, and putting our chats in there and all this sort of stuff. And in the end, ChatGPT gave some counsel around, look, there's certain points of friction and you need to come up with different structures and, some decision-making criteria and roles and responsibilities are having a bit of a racy. But what it actually took was for all of us to get in the room and say, if I'm being an asshole,
Yeah.
you have the permission to put in the chat, hey, Chris, you're being an asshole. And we stop at that point and go, right, inflection time or reflection time. Why? Is it the point that I'm trying to make? Is it the way I'm making it? Is it that you're not understanding the risks that I'm putting on the table? I'm in my swim lane. I've got a different set of responsibilities to you. What is that? But if I'm coming across, and ultimately that's, to your point, Danette, it's that where people feel that threat, they stop
Yes.
listening at the information and they start feeling the emotion. And the emotion
Yes.
is, this guy's just being a jerk.
Yeah.
Underneath that, there's a whole bunch of discovery, and that's that experimentation and being able to give each other that safe, like experimentation is about creating safe places to make mistakes.
Totally.
And being able to say that and being able to say everybody at the table has even ability to raise the red flag and say, you're being a jerk, man. Shut up for 5 minutes and let us explain why we think that. And we got down to each individual's motivators and different thinking styles and different approaches and, how we consume information and then present that back to the group. I'd do a whole journey in my head on a creative space, run to the table with a great solution and a great idea, but I'd be 6 weeks ahead in thinking on the rest of the team that is sitting in the room going, what the heck is this guy talking about? And he wants us to put how much money into this?
Yeah.
I hadn't brought them on the journey, but in my brain I had. And then I didn't understand why they were all being toxic and against me on some of this stuff. And it was literally the way that I just dumped it on them. And, one of our team, Jazz, really struggled with that approach because she's from a legal background and her approach is I need all the data, all the information, everything up front, and then I'm going to consider that, and then I'm going to consider it again and come up back with an opinion. So if I would sit in a room, pop a new idea and go, what do you reckon, Jazz? Jazz would freak out and not really know where to position that. And that's, I recognize that's my style. And I'd also stepped out of a role where for me, for the last 6 years, I was a global vice president for SAP, a huge multinational responsible for a lot of people where every decision's made in 1 second and then reflected on. And I was doing that back in the startup with 4 people in the room. And, again, hey, Chris, you're being a jerk. And I'm like, actually, yeah, I am. And we reflected and they said, you know what, at the time we get to the table and we're wanting to sell this as $1 billion idea to somebody, be the jerk. We need the jerk in the room. Those skills are going to be really needed. But while we're trying to design how to map this stuff and get customers on board, please, stop and listen. So that it was really the foundation was creating that safe space. And that's that ability to make mistakes and to fail fast.
Yep. Oh, I love it. Excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that too.
That's right.
So I'm curious, Chris, what sort of challenges have you seen when it comes to experimentation? And maybe even around an example of where experimentation didn't work, perhaps.
Yeah, look, lots of instances of where we're experimenting, and there's a couple of different ways to do it. There's in terms of you always hear people we're building the aircraft as we fly it is one common term, and then there's the we're planning to not fail is the other way to approach it. So are you doing planned experimentation where we're kind of going into it knowing we're experimenting, or you're doing stuff and then all of a sudden you get to the end of it and it didn't work and you go, that was a bit of an experiment that we didn't even know we were doing. And you should have a bit of both and be open for that. So I think some of the stuff that we had, which is really interesting, in the first startup, in a similar way to Lystr, we thought, hey, property management, property managers don't add any value. Let's build a platform where you can self-manage your own investment property. A lot of people do that and should be really easy. So we spent 18 months developing the tech for this, and it was about 4 days before we were going to go live. We stopped and went, this is not going to work. What the heck were we thinking? You need people. There's all these touch points. People got to go out to properties and do stuff, and investors don't live next door to their properties. And what about all the maintenance? And we thought about all these things and built some amazing tech workflows. But the reality is you're dealing with people and you're an intermediary when you're a property manager between an owner who's always annoyed at the tenant and a tenant who's always annoyed at the owner. And you're the meat in the sandwich. And we were going to go, we'll just build some IT that'll, take care of that. So we'd invested enormously, and then we're sitting there. We, at that stage, didn't really understand the fail fast concept, or we probably would have folded up and gone home. But we had to sit down and go, holy crap, how do we take where we're at, which is sitting in a big failed pile of code, and turn that around to what might be a successful business? And then we had to reframe what our parameters of success might look like. So we hadn't burnt all that experimentation to that point in time. So we took what we had and said, all right, we'll launch our own real estate agency. We didn't even know we needed a license to do that or anything at that point in time. So we were scrambling to get all that organized within a short period of time so we could still launch and not go broke. But we launched a real estate agency, and we used our own platform then that we'd developed to deliver services that were quite unique in the property management space. We ended up winning a national award from the Real Estate Institute for the work that we'd done, which was a real surprise because at the start we were, ready to take them head on. But going down that path of experimentation, every step of the development was an experimentation. But ultimately that entire first stage of that process failed. And it was a 10-year failure. Yes, we exited, and we exited nicely, but we were talking about, as most developers do, hey, what color are you going to get your yacht in, and how fast is your Ferrari going to go, before we'd even launched. And then we realized at the end of it, oh no, we've now got a business where, one, we can't scale. The tech platform is not quite going to do what we had anticipated it would do, and we need a whole bunch of people to run this. And so we'd really limited what outcomes we could get from that business. And it was quite intense and heavy lifting to get that business up and running and to continue going. So that was one where, we absolutely set out, experimented, and blew it up, but had to have the ability to pivot. But it was recognizing that pivot point. Now, if I applied my same strategies today, would I have continued past that point? And the honest answer is no, I should have stopped. Now, I did well financially, exited really well, but that's 10 years of possible other innovations that I'd parked while I was trying to pivot on an experiment that ultimately had failed. It was a reduced optimization of that success in the long run that could have been, if I'd launched Lystr 10 years ago, would I be in a totally different position today? Absolutely. I'd have a blue yacht.
Particular shade of blue, Chris?
It'd be sea blue, so nobody else could find me.
I love it. So then one of the things I know is that workplaces often struggle to encourage experimentation. So what are some things we can do to allow for more experimentation in the workplace?
What you do every day in your job, day in, day out, is your job. And these days, more employers define that more clearly because it reduces and limits their risk. And so you actually have to deliberately facilitate innovation and experimentation. You have to have a budget. You have to have an allowance. You have to have an encouragement of people sharing ideas and make that a deliberate part of your strategy. If you just expect it's going to happen, it won't. And it takes more energy to innovate and to experiment than it does to just do the daily stuff. And so if you're looking at from an organizational perspective, how much time should I allocate to this? And how do I allocate that time? Experimentation and thinking and innovation requires multiple people, sharing of ideas. You don't see somebody sit in a corner one day, a little light bulb pops above their head and goes ding, and they come out with, this world-saving idea. They've bounced it off lots of people. They've talked about it in the past. It's part of them and their history. Give them the safe space to put it on the table. It's also about relativity. A lot of innovation and experimentation comes from people trying to align all that directly with, you can be innovative, but it's got to be exactly matched to this business and what we do. So it's got to fit in with your job profile and your job spec. And so you're the CFO. Hey, you can be innovative, but be innovative in an accounting way. Oh my God, you don't want your accountants to be innovative, that's for sure. Yeah. But if you kind of sit there and say, anything's on the table. Yeah, exactly. Anything's on the table. You can come up with any idea because this company could just as quickly spin up another company where we've got another great idea that's totally unrelated to what we're doing that might be 10 times more profitable. And be open to that. It's much harder when you're in spaces like government and, the public sector to be like that. But certainly in the private sector, when you're in startup mode, everything's an option and you look for the type of people that are in that space. So talking about careers and talking about space for innovation, one of the biggest observations I've seen, I've been in startups, and one of the businesses I worked for was a unicorn. So it sold for $1 billion, or was acquired for $1 billion. And the entire culture of that organization changed overnight from being a unicorn, where it was a startup and it was pumping along and it was thinking and playing and behaving like a startup, to, yep, we're owned by a big multinational corporation now. Somebody spent $1 billion. Here's your new P&L. Here's how we're going to work and here's how we're going to operate. It stymied innovation. It killed all that experimentation instantly because people didn't see any link between bottom line performance, top line growth, and what were you doing from an innovative or an experimentation point of view. If they tracked back and kept that innovation track going, the acquisition, I believe, would have been more valuable, to continue to encourage that thinking and that growth. But it's not just encouraging it, it's creating that space and saying, hey, we're going to have an innovation space or innovation day, or, and it needs to be, 15 to 20% of your work week. And if you think about that, that's a day a week. And if you're paying wages and things like that, you're like, whoa, are we just going to throw away 20% of our wages? No, because that return, the one or two things, and people think so differently around these things. Innovation and experimentation could be, maybe we should just change this process, or could we automate this, or I've got this idea. They could be all these micro ideas. And if you pick them up and try them, and 3 or 4 out of 10 work, you're way in front of where you were if you hadn't done those. But if everything's a no, or hey, let's just focus on what we're doing right now, let's look at our project plan and let's look at our budgets. Yeah, you're not an innovator, you're not a startup, and you're not experimenting. You're surviving, and companies don't do as well when they're just trying to survive.
Yeah, that's so true. I just want to compliment that you used budget at the start there, Chris. Just saying, from
That's it.
first got to know each other.
You've got to put money into
Yeah.
it. It's none of it comes for free.
I love it. And I was recently reading, and it was an old article out of Harvard Business Review around execution. And one of the things which relates to what you raised was that they said, what does the culture actually reward? Does it reward people taking, those risks and being creative, or does it reward for, just making sure that we hit those targets that are, similar to what they were last year and stuff? So I like that you pointed that out. Yeah.
It's a huge thing, taking risk, but linking it to reward. I remember at one stage running the property management business, and I literally thought, I reckon we could accelerate this if people were more motivated just personally. And so I came out with this ridiculous financial target where I figured, if I took everybody, the whole team, to Fiji for a week, what would that cost me? And then if I do an uplift of 5 times of that, and so I've more than covered my cost in doing that. If the team achieve that, we'll go to Fiji. Thinking in my brain, there's no way. Anyway, we went to Fiji and the business had its best growth year ever because the team started to optimize the thinking. They were more free to experiment because they felt they had this incentive of whatever I do is going to get us to Fiji. And if that was the end goal that they were targeting for, I had set no parameters. I didn't say, and this is exactly how you get to that target. It's just, here's the bottom number for the business. If you get this, I'm taking you to Fiji. Now, we got there and there was a hurricane, but that's beside the point. We all went to Fiji. Yeah. And that was, at that time, we had 15 staff. So for a small business to park and say, let's go to Fiji for a week, was a phenomenal investment. But the return, as a business owner was incredible. And the efficiency that we got and the way people focused on how our business processes worked and where they were trying to do things differently, were things that we'd never even set as ideas or guidelines. So, it was fantastic to see that pay dividend.
I love that. Love that example. So next question is, why is it important for experimentation in terms of leaders and organizations that want to adapt? So if they don't experiment, is that going to help them adapt? Should they experiment?
Yeah. Great question, because a couple of years ago, we didn't have ChatGPT. And a few years before that, there were other platforms that didn't exist, and life moves on. And really, I think that the greatest parallel I can use, which is something I started with in this conversation, is society moves faster than the legislation can.
Yeah.
Yep. So you think about when Uber launched in Australia, the legislation wasn't there for self-ride, and they had to interpret that and just take the risk. Now,
Yeah.
ultimately, they got I think $100 and something million fine for the way they approached it.
Yeah.
But the industry and the tech was moving faster than anything else. And this is with any business and whatever you're doing. If you're sitting there and you're pretending your life is not changing and that the way you run your company today will be the same way you're running it in 2 to 3 years' time, it's not going to be the case. So your ability to experiment and adapt gives you that expandability. It gives you that opportunity. You know, there's lots of case studies. Kodak is a brilliant case study of how to do it wrong. Netflix versus what was it? The
Blockbuster.
video. Yeah,
Blockbusters. Yep.
Blockbuster. You know,
Yep.
there's yeah, we're going to send everybody the movies to their house by CD. That was Netflix and Blockbusters. Like, they're going to want to come into the store and get the, you know, best release of the week and stuff. And now look, Kodak, same sort of thing. No, we're not going into digital because people are always going to want film. It's how you think and shape and frame and create permission for that experimentation may fundamentally change your company. But not only that, it may change the way people do business and people do work. And that's the innovation. And that's then where you sit in that disruptor space where by accident, you're like, I think there might be a better way to do this. Let's give it a shot. And somebody saying, yeah, let's give it a shot, can set that change alight. And then, you know, it compounds from there. Conversely, if you sit in your boundaries and you're delivering things, then you're just another service provider, and ultimately you're becoming less and less efficient. Everybody's scared, hey, AI could take my job and all these types of things. No, learn AI, optimize it, and if you bring yourself and AI into your job, you'll be, you know, a superstar at work. And that's about you being able to experiment. And businesses that are like, I don't want to put anything in ChatGPT, I don't want to use AI at all, they're the businesses today that are going to be left behind. And it's not because they're trying to protect their staff. It's just the fear of the unknown. And if they don't know how to use ChatGPT, if you've got a 10 or 11-year-old kid in your house, I'll give you a lesson.
I love it. And Chris, one of the things I've always admired about you is that, you know, that growth mindset, that ability to experiment and change. And so I'd love for you to share with our listeners and viewers some of the things that you do to keep your mind wide open.
Yeah. I don't know. I think being a little bit ADHD and having a touch of autism helps. Honestly, you've got to create the space in your head to process and test your own thoughts and ideas, and then capture those and ask the questions. You know, it's why do we do it this way? Is always a key point. And you'll find in a room of 10 people that have followed the same process for years, probably one of them will be able to answer why it's done that way. And the rest of them learnt from that one or somebody before them that this is the way you do it. It's I think there was an experiment done where it was monkeys going up a ladder trying to get the bananas. And, you know, when the first monkey went up the ladder to get the banana, they'd zap it or smack it, and the monkey would come down. After they'd replaced all the original monkeys and new monkeys had joined, they wouldn't go up the ladder and didn't know why, because there was no ongoing punishments and things. The bananas had been removed, but they all knew not to go up the ladder. And so, you know, what's the principal lessons there? And we as people work the same way. You bring somebody in the team, look, here's how we do it. We're going to do your onboarding. We're going to train you. We're going to do all these things. You need to create that thinking space, that safe, quiet time. So where I talk about innovation and experimentation, some of that, where I say a day a week, some of that might be taking a walk for an hour or going down to a cafe and just sitting there by yourself and pondering, what did I do last week? What did I work through? What were some of the things that I felt didn't go as well as they could have, and why? And then once you get into that, you start going down the rabbit hole. And the rabbit hole is the greatest place to be when you're trying to experiment, because you come up with some really crazy, weird ideas. And they're the ones you should put on the table first. And everybody that's going to sit around you will debunk your ideas. We have this natural position as humans to go, that's a dumb idea. Or, oh, we haven't done that before, so there's got to be so much risk with that. Like, what the hell are you talking about, Chris? take those and go, you know what? I take that feedback and I'm going to prove to you that there's a way to make this work. And then that stubbornness around proving it, that's that fail fast, because you could become really stubborn and try to prove the same shit forever and never ever get there. But I really feel like creating that thinking space for yourself and leveraging people. One of the greatest things I've learned from you, Danette, over our years of working together was understand different people's thinking styles. Yeah, from a number of years. I had black hair when Danette and I first met. That's just saying something. But one of the things I've learned is people have different thinking styles, and you need to understand the thinking styles and the balance that you have in your teams to work out, I'm going to go with this great idea, and the first person I want to go to is the one that I know is negative about everything. And because I'm going to qualify what the risks might be in not doing this. And then I'm going to go to the person that's, I think the different color hats, but blue or green hat or whatever it might be, and say, do you think we can afford this? How much do you reckon this might cost? And would you invest in this if this was available on the ASX to buy, and get their opinion? And then you go to the yellow hat, the creative person or whoever it might be, and go, what do you reckon about this? They're always going to go, oh my God, that's an amazing idea. We totally should do it. You should take all the budget and all the money in the world. You don't want to start with them because you'll end up chasing rabbits down the rabbit hole. But once you've tested your idea internally within those groups, but knowing who you're testing with and being quite deliberate around those actions. So for me, the group that I start with is the group that I feel would be least likely to agree with my ideas and thoughts in this space. And then that then motivates me to go think about it some more, because often I wouldn't have thought about their objections. But yeah, that motivates me more to then go, I still reckon I could prove this wrong. Or I'll go, yeah, fair point. That probably would require the entire GDP of Australia to convert that. So we might park that one till next year, maybe.
I love that. So my next question, and it's sort of wrapping up towards the end here, is there anything else that you'd like to share with our listeners and viewers around the whole topic of experimenting, particularly because we're talking to people who are thinking about adapting and want to lead through that space?
Yep. Yes, absolutely. And it comes down to calmness and reactiveness. People, if you're a leader of an organization and you aren't calm and you are reactive, that immediately cancels out the thinking, I've got a safe space here. If you answer every question off the cuff that comes to you immediately, you're not in a safe space for innovation and entrepreneurship or experimentation. So if you're driving or you want your company to transform into this amazing, innovative, experimenting, encouraging type organization, the leaders of that organization have to be the quiet ones in those periods of thinking. They don't have all the ideas, and their job as the leader in that space is often to be the one that presents that they have the ideas, because that creates safety when you're following your conformity, when you're following all of your rules and regulations and your business processes. Your leaders need to have that behavior. When you're working in that innovation space, the leaders should be the quiet ones, and the team should be the ones to encourage to have those conversations and to be more outspoken. And so responding to innovative ideas and responding to experiments and those types of things should be done in a much more careful, considered, slow way of doing it. So if a staff member comes in and presents you with what could possibly be the dumbest idea you've ever heard in your life, you go, this is amazing. Thank you. Let me have some time to work through this. I'm going to come back with you with some questions. I'm going to test you on your thinking. And, we'll work through this one. Even if your immediate response is, this is the worst idea ever, that gives them that safe space to maybe, I've stuffed up that idea and it was a terrible idea. But they'll come back with another idea because they felt good about how that interaction went with you. Whereas if you immediately you look at the paper as soon as they deliver it, you read through it and go, oh, look, here's the problem here. And you're the black hat. And that's not your job in this process. You've got to be the yellow hat. You've got to be it's free and safe to experiment here. Or even, the best response when they do that is, that's awesome. How about I pay for lunch and we go out and talk about it and you just pitch this to me? Or here's some budget to go and explore some of these aspects, even if you know it's going to be a failure, because you need to have those failures to make that safe space to then move to the next step. And for every failure, you might have 50 failures for one success, but that success, if it converts your entire business, was worth all of those failures. But it's hard to do as a leader. And that's where your point earlier about budget. You've got to burn some money on this and you've got to burn some time. But yeah, be slow and be considered while you're going through these processes. And then once you're active in that idea and getting to like a beta stage, that's when you want to fail fast. You don't fail fast at the idea stage. You fail fast at the beta or the prototype stage.
I love that. A great distinction. And I love the fact, there's really good brain science there, because calm creates safety. And even your language, react versus respond. And that respond is a beautiful intentional space versus the reactive is the threat space. So
I had
advice.
a great coach that taught me that about 10 years ago. You may know her, but yeah, it was exactly that. It was talk less, listen more,
Yes.
give people that space. You don't know everything, because I tend to be that guy that would walk in the room and try and know everything. And I've learned that if you want experimentation, then you're the worst kind of boss to create that space where you already know all the answers.
Yeah, love that. Oh. So, Chris, what an awesome conversation. Thank you so much for joining us on Adapt with DanetteFM. And to all of our listeners and viewers, stay adaptable.
And Danette, another great chat for this season. Chris,
Yes.
what a great guy, and it's great to see old friends catching up as always. What was your takeaways from the chat?
So many, but a couple that I really liked was, how do you deal with friction? So if you're bringing people together and experimenting, there's going to be friction. And I really liked, pardon the swearing here, but the arsehole rule. So giving people permission, if you are being an arsehole, for them to be able to call it out, not to shut down the conversation, but for that person then to reflect on, have I brought everyone along on the journey? Or maybe, I've got really emotional about this thing and I need to step back. So I really liked that particular discussion. The other thing that is really important is looking at, what does your culture reward? So are you actually rewarding your people for experimenting, or are you creating a culture where you say you want people to experiment, but actually you're not rewarding that behavior at all? So there were so many other great takeaways, and I'm definitely going back to listen to this episode again. Awesome. What about you, Jez?
Yeah, no, I thought it was a great chat, and I agreed. I had the fail fast thing as a big headline, but I thought that one thing that I thought was sort of a subtler note that I liked a lot about this was how much it was talking about listening. Like how much it's about using listening as an important skill, and so I just thought that, like, I think it's such a cliche to say, but it's such a good rule, is that, you have 2 ears and 1 mouth, and you should use them in that ratio. I think that this was seeing someone who's, done so many different things, and then it comes and you think this is going to be the voice, but really his power is the ears that allows him to sort of, guide. So I just thought that was excellent and great to hear from Chris.
Yes. Yeah.
Great. Well, Danette, speaking of listening, you like listening to some listener questions, and so I think let's jump into our segment where they get to ask you something. Our segment, Ask and Adapt. Alrighty, this is Ask and Adapt. This is where people can write in, Danette. If they're struggling with something, they need a little bit of adaptability, inspiration in their life, they can write into you at adaptwithdanette@gmail.com, and they can send you a question which you will answer potentially on the podcast. So this week, we've got a question from Andrew, and Andrew's written in. Hi, Danette. So happy to see your show is back. My question is, how can I bring experimentation into my workplace, even if I'm in a junior role? Thank you, Andrew.
Nice. And Andrew, you've already displayed the best quality. So you're asking questions and you're curious about, how do I do this? So I would encourage you to create some time, if you can, whether it's once a week, once every day, just to think about what are some things that you could improve on that you're working with. In the last episode, I spoke about looking at what you're tolerating. So you or maybe one of your customers or stakeholders might just find a process, and we call that a toleration. So that would be something that would be ripe to how do we make this better? There's a book, The One Thing, and I'm pretty sure this question comes from this book, and it's how do we make this easier? And so I also like asking that question because, how do you show initiative and how do you move up the ranks in organizations? You're willing to question what is and look for better ways to do things. Now, some organizations won't like that, and it's probably not the culture if you want to experiment and grow. So that's good data. And what you may find is you land in an organization where that's actually really appreciated, and that's going to help you move up the organization faster. The other question I really love is what if? What if we change this? What if we try this? What if we connect this? Just constantly asking those questions and staying curious about how do we do this better, I think can be really, really helpful. Great question, Andrew. Thank you. What about you,
Yeah.
Jez? Any advice for Andrew?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that you've covered a lot of really good topics there. I think that the thing is, in a junior role, one advantage that you have is that to some degree there's less responsibility in the sense that your decisions, like at a junior role, if you're a graphic designer or even like something that I'm doing, like podcast producing, it's not the end of the world if something goes hot. Like the stakes are not, people losing their jobs potentially if something goes horribly wrong, obviously within reason. But, it's like and that gives you space where it's not do or die to experiment. And if you can and what that's going to help do is refine your podcast. There's been different things that we've done to refine podcasts in the past. And so I think that this is, our podcast, especially the Magical Learning podcast, has changed so much. Even if people check out the season 1 of this podcast, they'll see graphics have been updated. They'll see the quality of the camera has been updated. Even the flow of the conversation has changed. Experimentation helps form what this exact thing looks like in a different era. And so for the 2026 version, this is how we've gotten here. But, different things for different people. And so I think it's a very 2020s thing to experiment. If you're junior, you should always ask, is there some area that where there's not do or die scenarios that I can do a little bit of experimentation and we can have a bit of fun with?
Yeah. And I think, this is applicable to anyone, but particularly when you're starting out, having conversations with different stakeholders, different people. One, you're increasing your network, but 2, you're showing that you're interested in whatever you're doing from their perspective. So they may also spot stuff that you're completely unaware of, but if you help fix it, again, they're going to see you as a go-getter and someone that they, want to hang around with. So it's a great way of improving your network as well. Yeah.
Well, Danette, another great episode. I think we're sort of about halfway through the season here. We've done a great job of sort of touching a lot of different things. Did you have anything you wanted to leave people with from this episode?
So I think that I really like Chris's thing around the fail fast. Don't be over-invested if you've invested a bit of money and go or a lot of time. It's like, is this working? No, let's fail it fast. But don't fail fast ideas. So I really liked his point towards the end where you don't want someone coming in, they're all excited, it's a great new idea, and you're like, no. As a leader, you need to listen, as you were talking about before. But there will be processes and things we do where we put it in place and then we just go, it's not working. So we fail those fast, but not the idea. So I really like that distinction too.
Yeah. Well, Danette, thank you so much for another great episode.
Jez.
I had a great time and it was great I'll have to listen to this one again as well.
Yes.
Did you have anything you wanted to leave people with?
Just for everyone, thank you so much for listening, sharing, commenting, and as always, stay adaptable.